I have done so much thinking about that episode.
Prior to re-listening to it?
Prior to, after, it is...
During
was unreal.
Did you have to listen to it twice, or was that Scott? Somebody did.
I did.
Oh, you did?
When
okay.
I was done with that episode, you guys, I said, the podcast is all done. I'm not doing the podcast anymore. Hey, it's me, Erin. Thanks for joining us on the More Love podcast. Do not tell Rebecca, but this podcast is about empathy. She likes people to think she's dead inside, but the truth is she's a big-time feeler who has truly helped me uncover that empathy is my superpower. Oh, here she comes.
Hey, bestie.
Hi, love.
What are you doing?
Oh, just getting ready to host a podcast.
A podcast? About what?
Life. Our life as best friends, who are more like sisters.
Ah, yay! I love us, and I can't wait to share our stories with the world.
Especially the ones that involve us pushing each other, right? To be our most authentic selves.
Oh, man. Okay.
You remember how you guys wanted to just start a frickin' podcast in the middle of a conversation?
I'm not kidding. Is that something people can do?
Yeah.
Stop it. You guys could have started this podcast just where that conversation was just going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
I gotta say two things.
It's incredible.
I went to the air show yesterday, so I got sunburned, and so my fake tan is peeling off.
Oh.
That's number one. Number two, I went to Walmart with the girls the other day, and I had just put a spray tan on, and I wore a white shirt. Did it start to rain? And as soon as it got wet, did it bleed through?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the Walmart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish you were at Walmart.
I know. It was really funny. But anyway, yes, I could start right there.
You could have started right there. You too, Scott?
Oh, yeah.
Listen, you guys. So Rebecca just asked me a question before we started this session. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really good content. We need to talk about this on the show. So then we all three of us started talking about it. And then I noticed my anxiety spike because I'm like, we're wasting the good content for the show. And then Scott out of nowhere is like, I've already started recording. And then I'm all done because I'm like, what do you mean you've started recording? We didn't do the intro. And then Rebecca says, well, we can add that in. I'm like, no, we can't. I'm sorry, you guys. The way that this goes is that the intro plays, well, and then we have some witty statement that happens after that, and then we get into the content.
It has to be the cadence for her.
This is incredible.
Make sure you turn the light switch on, then off, then on, then do a circle, and then off.
That's
and
right.
then on.
That's right.
So, Rebecca, what was your question?
So I said what's really interesting to me is you made it. We're so far ahead with our podcasts that I can't even remember. Sometimes when I re-listen to them, I'm like, whoa, that was a while ago.
There's a thing on the submission form that says, when will this air? And now I've just started being like, no clue, not sure, don't know.
Well, you're asking me to schedule the guests, and I had to say to you, we're in 2025.
Oh yeah,
we're because at this point, we have so many guests there every other episode.
That's right.
So and then I thought to myself as I'm reviewing our timeline, I'm like, does she realize that just because we record them in a certain way doesn't mean they need to air that way?
Yeah, of course.
Because in my mind, we have like 8 in the hopper, right? And then we did a sports part 1 and part 2, and in my mind, that part 2 could have been brought up to be after the part 1, but because we didn't do it in that order, it can't be produced or it can't be published in that order. I know how your brain works so much.
Absolutely
God
not.
forbid.
These all build on each other. They all build on each other. Each one is supposed to get a little bit better than the one before it.
So in my mind, even though we do them back to back, she could mix them up in the order of production because then we're not wearing the same outfits.
If you want that to happen, you all are going to have to do that behind my back. And I'll go with it. Whatever you decide is fine.
No, you won't. You're going to have a reaction. You'll be like, ooh, that one was recorded differently. Okay. I just know you so well.
For real, cannot do that myself. I won't make it. I won't make it.
I know, but I did have that a thought. I'm like, does she realize? But anyway, so that brings me back to
my text message.
Oh, about the one show we did. So it was I also posted. Okay. rewind. This is why it came up. I posted in the Facebook page something like, what do you guys want to talk about? Or is there something on your minds or whatever? And then Sarah posted what she posted. And it was all because the shooting at Donald Trump. I don't know if it was an assassination attempt. I don't know what it was, but it was stemming from that. And I was like, oh, we did actually talk about this, but because we're so far behind and God forbid Aaron move anything around so that it's relevant in the moment. People 8 weeks later are going to be like, we're going to be like, oh, did you see Donald Trump was shot? I mean, they're going to know how far ahead we are. Right. But don't move that one. But anyway. So Scott, you hear me, right?
I hear you.
Okay. So,
you all have creative liberty here. And in fact, Scott's the one who decides what's get posted. I don't care, but don't tell me about it. Do not tell me what's being posted when.
That's
very
funny.
well.
You just got to change the numbers of the episodes. It's not like you even
don't
talk
tell
about
me.
it.
Just don't tell me.
Anyway,
don't tell me.
So, I believe it was that episode that because that happened, we had a lot to talk about. And, it's the election year and the debates, I think, just started happening and whatever. And both you and I are not, I am not politically savvy. I don't pay attention to it. I couldn't have told you who the vice president was this past. I have no freaking clue, right?
Yeah.
So when these kinds of things come up, it's, I have a hard time talking about it because I don't know facts and I don't like making assumptions. I have a really difficult time engaging with people when I don't know the facts because you can be swayed very easily, like all these kinds of things.
Or you can offend people really easily because you're not bringing the same
and you don't know
level
what you're
of
talking
knowledge
about
to the table
or whatever.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I'm just going off of feelings and just the bits of information that I do know. But at the same time, my intent is never to offend anybody.
Right.
And so I think in my mind, it's okay to have a conversation, even if you have a point of view one way, because reality is it's just a point of view. And because my intent isn't to offend anybody, I feel okay about talking about it. Right. Or, the kinds of things on the show.
Yeah.
Where you get really nervous, especially if it's not a one-on-one conversation.
That is the understatement of 2024.
Right. Especially if it's not a conversation. Right. If it's not a conversation, you and I have many conversations where I know your phone. Right. I know your deep down opinions. I know where you stand on things. We've had quote unquote debates or intellectual. We've had a lot of conversations. And at the end of the day, could you and I pinpoint exactly where we are in the world of politics? I don't think so, because the reality is I don't think you and I either we don't understand right versus left, red versus blue. Like we don't understand any of that. We just know how we feel about certain issues. Right. And at the end of the day, it's such a jobbled mess.
Yeah.
But I asked her, I go, do you feel like you can't take a stance or have public standing opinions? Like even wearing a cross necklace would be really hard for you if you were a Christian. Like I am not saying you are, but if you did have, or your child was autistic, wearing a symbol of that, you would have a very hard time doing that because of multiple reasons. And I said, is that your personality or is that your professional training? Because I said, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and I'm very clear about where I stand and how I feel, but I don't always, people may think I express it, but I don't. And I think it's because my quote unquote professional experience from 18 on was in liberal higher education environments where everything had to be PC and everything had to be vanilla and gray. And if you did have an opinion or a stance or whatever, it was not okay because of the role that I played.
Yep.
And you don't get to play that role 9 to 5.
Yep.
You play that role 100% of the time.
Yep.
So you're a therapist by trade,
right?
And worked in liberal higher education, for the most part.
Right.
Well, I don't know. Maybe some of the ones you did weren't necessarily liberal, but
most just higher ed in general.
I worked at a state institution of New York, which means it's as liberal as you get. So I wonder for you, I'm much more brash and whatever, but I don't have a therapist degree where, whatever. And maybe that's the empathy superpower or whatever. But at the same time, I'm not, I think people make a lot of assumptions about what I stand for or how I feel deep down. I really do. Based on, I value the concept. If I'm going to say something out loud, I got to be able to stand by it and say it to your face. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so
I have done so much thinking about that episode.
Prior to re-listening to it?
Prior to, after, it is
During?
During was unreal.
Did you have to listen to it twice, or was that Scott? Somebody did.
I did.
Oh, you did?
When
Okay.
I was done with that episode, you guys, I said, the podcast is all done. I'm not doing the podcast anymore.
Oh, the whole thing. You were going to throw it away.
Oh, yeah, I was all done.
Because, tell me more about that.
I was all done. I was not doing the podcast anymore.
Scott, just so we're clear, we're playing this one directly after that one. Okay? Put it, mark it down, because it will be irrelevant, especially if people don't listen in a row. Go ahead.
You guys.
What was it?
I don't understand how you guys didn't have that reaction.
I didn't listen to it.
It was.
I only listened to it after you published that shit online.
Is it published already?
No.
Okay.
That one's not out yet.
Absolutely.
Coming out in
unreal.
about 4 weeks.
Yeah. At this point, it's in 2025.
So tell me.
During that particular conversation, every single one of the topics that we talked about was heated, opinionated, and potentially controversial in one way, shape, or form. Because we started with the school shooting and the parents, and how
that was the episode.
and how the parents were
Held responsible.
Then we went on to the man with the 1,000 children.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then we went on to Trump's ear getting shot.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Oh, people are going to love this one.
The whole episode, right? So during that episode, what I was feeling internally, you would never have been able to see.
Hold on.
As I've watched it back.
And when you watch it, quote unquote, you're watching the video.
Yes.
You don't just listen to it. So you're getting you're getting the facial expressions.
When I rewatched it. Because I rewatched this one, folks, to determine whether or not it was going to air or not.
Right.
I legit.
But I'm saying you're watching it. You don't just listen.
No,
because I think there's two different experiences when you listen or watch.
Absolutely agreed. And I think that the most stimuli comes from me when I watch and when I listen. So I wanted to give it my flood me with all of the information, because I thought to myself, if this is going to air, which I'm 98% sure it's not, was my original thought, then I want to make sure that I know what's going on there.
It's totally valid, but that's important.
When I watched it back was one of my really biggest kind of, I don't know if epiphany is the right word. Did you watch it back, Scott? You did. You and Joe both watched it back. Okay. What I was feeling in that session was absolutely uncomfortable. I felt, God.
Well, I need to know what was it that made you uncomfortable? The subject, the intensity of the back and forth, the words that were used, the stances anybody in the room took, which I can't, honestly, I don't even remember what we said.
All three of those. It was the intensity. It was probably also coupled with, like you said in the very beginning, not feeling like I know a ton at the end of the day about how to contribute to the conversation of politics, because I don't feel like I have enough information about it. I hadn't watched the documentary.
Did you?
So then I went on and watched it, right? But I was like, I have to watch I think I even said in the thing, I have to watch the documentary to have an opinion on it.
Right.
But then I found myself having an opinion on it before I watched the documentary. That threw me into a tailspin. The man with the 1,000 children threw me into a tailspin, because that is the closest I felt to world doom ever.
Did it blow
because
your
I
mind?
started to go into all of these three men and their procreation agendas, and how, and I'm like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And then we haven't fixed the problem. And so then I started to spiral on that. And so it was the intensity of the conversation. It was the strong awareness that I have about how polarized these types of conversations are. And then when I went back,
triggering for certain people, and sometimes taken out of context,
Yep.
which can make the trigger happen.
And I already don't feel comfortable in a political environment because I don't feel it's not a safe environment for me. Online is not safe. You know, posting anything about how you feel about anything feels unsafe. And for someone like me who is empathy is wrapped up in being understood and someone genuinely getting to know me instead of taking it out of context, that's a theme even when I will post to Instagram and won't read the comments because I can't read the comments because some of the things that people say are really misunderstanding who I am as a person, right? So that's a struggle for me. So I was 100% positive at the time right after I got in the car and I was like, I'm all done with the podcast. I'm not doing the podcast anymore. We're going to phase out the podcast completely. Not just that session. Like we're all done. We're going to have one more podcast because we're not going to end on that note. And then we're all done. I'm not doing it anymore. I felt so incredibly heightened sense of uncomfortable in that situation. And then as the days...
Oh, wait, I need to know why you went to that extreme and didn't say, we're not going to discuss any of those kinds of topics.
I don't know. Isn't that interesting?
Like, we need to put a limit on... Our goal is to not spark controversy. Like, put more boundaries. Like, why didn't you go to, we need to have more boundaries? Why did you say, I'm all done?
I think it was, I can't put boundaries on it because then it's inauthentic. And if it's inauthentic, then that ruins the entirety of why we do the podcast. Because the authenticity associated with the podcast is what I think makes people connected to the podcast, right? Like,
but putting, I mean, it's kind of like, what's that word? I don't know what the word is, but we talk about boundaries all the time.
Right. So about setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think it would be completely normal to think, step one.
Part of it is probably also my very black and white thinking.
Oh, maybe. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm not thinking to myself, there's anything between 0 and 100.
Okay.
And also my nervous system was so heightened that I tend to do that anyway.
You also
So I
think things
tend
are
to
way
go,
worse
Oh, yeah.
than they actually are.
As far as I was concerned, when I just experienced that episode, it was one of the worst things that had ever come out on the air ever, and was going to have people 100% stop listening to the podcast. No one, they're going to hate you.
Okay.
They're going to quasi hate me.
Okay.
And I don't know how they feel about Scott. I don't know if
Scott's always in the middle.
Scott sometimes said some things. Scott sometimes said some things.
But why would you think that they would hate me? Because everybody that listens to our podcast is a certain way?
No, but those who are not like you might have a really hard time in the moment with some of the things that you had said.
Which is okay.
And vice versa. And that part was not okay to me.
Okay.
Because that's not okay to me because I feel really protective of you.
Okay.
So it was coming out of this. And also because I know you to be someone that you will say things sometimes before you've thought them all through. And I'm willing to stick around for that and entertain that conversation. And the people, again, this is part of the political climate we're in right now, they ain't hanging for those conversations. They hear you say something like whatever, and they're like, out, hater, all done. She's right. Or me too, right? So I'm playing that game by trying to be vanilla or trying to like really understand the ins and outs of that. Now, this is important to say that this was in the moment.
Right. This was after we recorded, before
right.
you re-listened. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And I was feeling just a very strong sense of, I don't want people to see you in any other light. I don't want people to see Scott in a certain way. I don't want them to lump all three of us together. There are people who 100% don't think like me and think to themselves, she's playing this real safe. She needs to have a stronger opinion on this, right? But I, again, think to myself, I'll shoulder that. That's okay. I'll handle that, right? So it was coming out of this place of protection. And so then I said to Scott, because he sends me usually the episodes.
The raw footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the episodes now, most of them, we use generative AI to basically help us figure out what are the ins and outs and the stopping points and the descriptions
You
and
use
the
our
whatever.
friend Meta L.
I use Meta L. Yeah, Meta L.
Good. Meta L and Marianne
Meta L.
help you.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
They are great employees.
Which is really great because it's cut my review time from an hour and a half
bet.
down to 15 minutes.
Listen,
right? Talk about
if you
efficiency.
are not working
with Marianne,
smarter.
Get your own Marianne, number one.
You're
works
an idiot.
for us. So.
Yeah, right. Find someone else.
That's right. Get yourself a Mary Jo, but Marianne is ours.
Okay, anyway.
So then I say, Scott, I need you to send me that full episode of that one because I need to rewatch it. So I get it. I go in. I rewatch it. I rewatch it at a time that
How many times did you pause to take a poop? Or did you at least have urges?
Urges were there the entire
okay,
time. I want to
okay.
say at least one. And that was before we even got started because I was so nervous about it.
Yeah.
But this is where the fascinating part comes in.
Okay.
I rewatched that video and was like,
It was much tamer than you thought.
oh, that's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. That's actually a pretty good episode. Oh, that's really interesting.
Oh, okay. Made you even think.
Oh, wow. Those are some good conversation topics.
You know what's funny? That you just triggered me to, when I re-listen, I'm like, it still triggers me to think different things or I'm like, oh, wow, we could have gone in this direction or this could have happened or whatever.
This?
Yeah. So funny. So funny. Okay.
And I walked away from that episode being like, that was great.
Okay.
That actually wasn't really edgy at all.
Scott
wasn't a whole
watched
lot.
it,
So then
and so did Joe.
What did I say? I sent it to you guys and I said I would really strongly encourage you to watch this episode.
I definitely did not.
To make sure that you are okay with whatever is going to be put out there on the interwebs, because this is a big one.
I mean, if you're okay, then everybody's going to be fine.
Probably.
That's how I view it. I'm like, if she's okay with it, then.
So
wait, Scott, you tell us.
You and Joe went in and what?
Actually, I didn't watch it again. I just gave it to Joe to watch.
And what did he?
And I said, tell me if there's anything that's horrible that we shouldn't post. And he said, no, it's great. He's very astute politically. So if he was, if he found anything that was a red flag, he would have told me. That was why I put 100% trust in him.
So that was his lens. Aaron's lens was, are people going to have opinions about us as humans?
No, I know.
Oh, okay.
I know. But
but he didn't feel any red flags in that way either.
No. It was just a conversation about opinions, and I don't think any one of us really doubled down on any of those opinions to the point where it was like,
I don't have a lot of double down opinions.
It was more of like, this is what I've heard, this is what I think, but I'm not quite sure, and we're
open to discussion, and I could easily have my mind changed. I could easily see a different point of view, but right now with the information that I have, this is how I feel. That's why I want to talk about it. Can you provide some insight? And then, that might influence how I feel. But that's how I approach those kinds of conversations in general. Yeah. And fully recognizing that watching a Netflix documentary, again, I don't know who produced things. Like it all comes from people's lenses and how they're portraying information. So I'm very conscious of that and don't take it as ironclad. This is it,
So what amazed me about the rewatch was two things. One, I watched myself in that video knowing that I was probably the most anxious I've been in all of 2024, and you could not see it anywhere.
Wow.
I don't know, maybe I'll have to ask people who know me like really, 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 really well. Like, did you pick up on any of that? You couldn't see it coming a mile away.
But
that's what I thought too. I was
but that's what I was going to say. I feel like,
and then why is my question? And is that healthy?
You would have shut it down.
Is that okay?
Well, then again, you're so black and white. I would assume if you're uncomfortable in the moment, you're going to say, Scott, this is a timeout. We can't do this. We need to pivot. Cut it out. But you can't do that because the thing's running.
The timer's running and we're doing a session.
But you can say, guys, we can't.
Nope, I would wait till we got to the end and I would be like, we're all done. We're not posting that video.
But that was a waste of time. fine. We could have pivoted.
I know. I would rather us, because I can't pick up halfway through and talk about a new topic and then only know it's going to go for 30 minutes.
You also have to debrief and process everything.
Oh, yeah.
So therefore, I should know that.
I'm just surprised that you would shit can this whole thing because of one episode.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm surprised she didn't say we got to put some boundaries on this.
But again, this is one of my I don't know if it's a defense mechanism or what it is. I go to when my nervous system is escalated to that point, it is like I'm put in fight or flight mode. And I'm not going to fight in that moment because I didn't have anything to fight. I didn't have to fight with you. I didn't have to fight with you, Scott. There was nothing to fight or flight. So I'm going to flight. But what it takes to get me to that point, one, there's certain arguments with my husband that will put me in fight or flight.
Right.
Two, that podcast put me in fight or flight. And I would say maybe three other things that I can think about that I don't know off the top of my head put me in that physical, I'm all shut down,
I'm going to tell you what it is.
Done mode.
I'm going to tell you what it is. At that point in time, multiple things in your life are happening. You are prepping to become a college professor that you will now have exposure to a ton of new type of people. Mm-hmm. That's number one. Number two, people, groups, whatever, are coming at you and giving you consulting opportunities, which now means your day structure, you're almost right back in to crazy pants time. Mm-hmm. And you're running a business. Mm-hmm. And
whose primary sales people are institutions of higher education.
Correct.
Primary sales outlet. Yeah.
There are significant things
and
that
Instagram.
Impact.
And my Instagram,
right,
which is a very anxiety-provoking outpouring of energy for me.
So had that particular episode happened back in February, March, never would have had that reaction.
Maybe not.
No, I can tell you it wouldn't.
That makes
you would have a reaction of, "Ooh, that didn't feel good. I'm nervous," but you never would have said, "I'm shutting this down." Mm-hmm. Your plate is overflowing again, mm-hmm. and this was one of those things that's like, if I've got to take something off, it's got to be this.
Or I can't continue to stand the attacks to my nervous system that put me in that place, because then it derails me for days.
Correct.
Right? And we're talking actually weeks. Mm-hmm. So as an energy preservation, I think I go to shutdown mode, which is, I'm all done. I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. Now, thankfully, I know that about myself in some of these situations. And what I don't do is send off this message to both of you that says, hey, guys, this has been really great. We're all done. We're not doing the podcast anymore. Right?
Correct.
I'm not going to do that. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to figure out, okay, where is this coming from?
Right.
Why am I feeling this way?
Right.
But I'm also finding myself highly sensitive right now, probably also because of the amount of overload that I had, about little things that usually don't bother me. Mm-hmm. People's definitiveness on things is driving me effing batty right now. Mm. People's judgment of things, definitiveness, I have the answer, listen to me, which is ironic coming from me, I know, is driving me nuts. I can't hear it. I cannot hear it right now. Mm-hmm. It makes me want to say things that are absolutely inappropriate. It's another thing I know about myself, right? I got a quick tongue.
Yep.
And will say things that will very hurt people.
And see, I'm the opposite. I love it. Whoops. Whoa. Man down. I love definitiveness, because then I just know where people stand and I know how to manage that. It doesn't make me not like you. It doesn't make me not respect you. It doesn't make anything.
But don't you think that the definitiveness for you that makes you feel better is because you genuinely allow people to have their definitiveness, and then you just accept that for what it is that they're saying, right? And you're like, okay, well, this is where this person is. Or if there's a part of you that's like, all right, well, that's where you say you are. I know you're not there, but whatever, it's whatever, I'll move on. That's part of the comfort of that.
Maybe.
Because for me, you'll tell me that that's where you are on something and why you're definitive about it. And I'm like, that's not it. Got to go down the rabbit hole of all the ways that your past experience and your past trauma and the way you think about things. And let me come up with different examples of ways that hasn't been the case. And you sound so definitive, but remember when this happened? And so like, it can never just be that. That's where the therapist part comes in.
But
right?
maybe because I'm an energy, the same type of energy, and I had to build a long, long time ago, all these walls, I have to make it definitive because otherwise I will spiral.
Yep.
So therefore.
But I know that about you.
Right.
And then when I hear you say something definitive, because I know you so well, I'm like, she doesn't really mean that as definitively as it just sounded. And also people are going to judge you based on the fact that you were that definitive. But just so you're clear, she's really not a raging right? That's not who she is. So then now I'm activated because now I'm worried that people are like, oh my God, Rebecca's freaking crazy. And remember how I felt when you were talking about the gender roles? This is so stupid. That's so stupid. But I just feel this.
Do you know that I went down the rabbit hole the other day and took 3 different "Are you a feminist?" quizzes
because you gotta double check yourself.
I can't tell.
Like, I don't know.
I can't. Right.
I thought I was, but like,
no, I'm like, I don't know.
Myself some questions that make me not.
But I think that's part of the problem of taking individual things and having feelings about it versus a big topic and being definitive on it.
Right.
I can be if you break down all the concepts of what it is to be a feminist. Some of them I'm very strong on. Some of them I'm not.
Not so much.
Like one stupid example. This is so stupid. And you can all judge me all you want. And it's fine.
Oh, God.
It's fine. I'm at the air show yesterday and we were sitting in our folding chairs or whatever. And a woman with her family walks by. She was probably in college with her parents or whatever. Full on hairy legs.
Okay.
And I had a very, very strong reaction to that.
Okay.
It's not okay.
You didn't like that for her.
Absolutely. I didn't like it for me.
Okay.
I don't want to look at it. I could not stop looking. It was gross.
And so you're saying that might not make you a feminist because a feminist would have said,
do your thing.
Go. I
mean, reality is.
Right.
Let your freak flag let it fly. Go ahead. Let your freak flag fly. But that's not okay for me.
Yeah,
and it's not okay for my girls.
I'm with you on that.
We're not doing that because that's gross. Absolutely not. Right? So I know that's one little teeny tiny thing, but that doesn't make me not support women's rights and equality and all that shit.
Right.
Right. But I had a very strong feeling about that. Right. In fact, I was waiting for Sawyer to turn to me and be like, is that a boy or a girl? Right.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway,
I know.
But
I know. Okay, feminism.
We were talking about your reaction to
my strong reaction to you to
definitiveness.
Yeah,
that is not okay right now for you. You hate.
Oh, that is just one thing.
Oh,
that's not.
There's more things.
Oh,
okay.
Oh, it's
okay.
And so I'm. Oh, okay. I remember what I was going to say. I'm very aware of the overwhelm and how it's associated with some of my reactions right now, which is
normal.
Thank God I know that, right? And I'm not just reacting to it. Even when we were on vacation with Nina and Laura, I was picking up on the fact that Nina wasn't acting the way that she normally acts. So I've asked her 3 times, you sure everything's okay? Sure, right? Because I'm so hypersensitive to those. And she's like, oh yeah, my back hurts or whatever, right? I'm like, that ain't it. She's not telling me. She's not telling me what the issue is. Then I'm down the rabbit hole, right?
In your mind or with
in
her?
my mind. In my mind. Oh yeah, I almost wrote to her today.
Oh my God.
I almost was going to be like, I hope you have a really good day. By the way, everything okay? What's going on? Right? So then you add that hypervigilance to the conversation. But then this is what I was going to say about that. This leads to a conversation I had with Kelly up the street the other day. The word that I used when I was talking to her was I imprint on people. So all I can think about is Avatar, where you connect your little
tail or whatever,
your hair fins together.
Yeah.
Or like a penguin who like mates for life. So here's the thing. I am such a committer that I have imprinted on these very certain people in my life. You're one of them. Nina's one of them. Renee is one of them. Kelly's one of them. When I say imprint, I mean like there's really nothing in the world that you could do that would make me not come rushing in if something were to happen, or if you needed something, or if you were upset, I wouldn't go anywhere, right? Those kind of things. But then once that imprinting, this is a terrible word, but once that avatar brainwave
once the connection happens, once
Yes.
the magnetic force is no longer inseparable.
That's right. Once we are one to become one, once we are one.
Yeah, once you're twin flames,
you might as well be an extension of my physical body.
Okay.
But what that does to someone who's highly sensitive like myself is that now you're getting that level of energy, connection, detail, awareness, whatever, that I don't give to everyone in the world, but I do give to this very small group of people. So then when I'm going through something in my life where I'm, again, totally stressed out with all of these things happening, and then I misread or are oversensitive to a situation, like, how come Nina's not talking as much as she used to, right? Or I'm worried that Rebecca said something during that podcast episode that people aren't going to understand her correctly. Then I end up going down this energy rabbit hole of energy that I didn't have to begin with, that is now being exerted to caretake in that way. And the reason we talked about imprinting was I can set really great boundaries with the people at the coffee shop. Now, you'd like me to set boundaries a little bit quicker than I do, right? But I'm able to not take people home with me, right? The woman at Target is another example, right? But when it is someone that I've imprinted with, there absolutely is no boundaries. Even, I don't care how many times you tell me there probably should be boundaries with these people. Even if I disagree with things that people are doing, even if I'm like, that was the dumbest decision and I don't want that for you, I cannot disconnect from that. And then you add to that this incredible depth of feeling and energy and connection, and it just sends me on these energy spirals that are, I wish I could explain it in words. It is all soul encompassing.
No, I absolutely understand.
And that was playing out in that episode. Within that moment, I'm so uncomfortable. Then I watch it back and I'm confused about why I was so uncomfortable. Then I'm confused about how I have the ability to hide it so well, because I was amazed at what my inside was feeling compared to what my outside was projecting. Then I was like, well, why is that? And why were you in that escalated place versus just being present in the moment? And then I thought, well, I think that I just I put it on myself to tend to so many things in a given moment. So I'm multitasking, right? I'm trying to frame the conversation around something that might be interesting for listeners. I'm trying to be aware of the time and like when we're hitting certain time stamps with conversations.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember what we've just talked about in order to come back to it so that there aren't weird blips.
This is also very public. This isn't a group of our friends, like a house full of people that we know ins and outs, because I've heard you have opinionated is not the right word. I mean, it is opinionated, but it's done in a really nice way that isn't offensive to people, but people kind of know where you stand, even if you disagree, even if people disagree. But that's how I'm coming across. I'm perfectly fine to have the conversation, but I'm also allowed to feel the way that I feel.
Absolutely.
If I'm grossed out by your nasty ass hairy legs, that's fine. I'm still going to be friends with you. I'm still going to hang out. I may say, how's that hair feeling? I mean, whatever. Yeah. But,
Do you need a comb?
Right. But like you and I have had very serious conversations about gender neutral bathrooms.
Yep.
Right. We've in front of other people who feel the same, different, whatever than the topics we're talking about.
Yep.
And they can be really nice conversations, but at the end of the day, I know where you stand, you know where I stand. We've talked about college dormitories. That's our past, right? So like I have very strong feelings about co-ed dormitories. Like there's just certain things that exist in my brain a certain way. Can I have intelligent conversations? Can I hear both sides? Can I understand? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, when it's my turn for my kid to go there, I have to have a stance.
Yep.
And it's got to be in line. I can't say this out in public, but then when it comes to my kid, be different. Because that's not fair and it's not right. That makes me look like I play both sides of the fence. That's what I get nervous about. I don't want somebody to, people can make assumptions about what I think and feel. That's fine. But I don't want to say to you, this is how I feel. And then to another group of people, this is how I feel. And they're different. That feels inauthentic to me, you know?
Yep. And I think the public nature of the podcast, coupled with the fact that it is recorded. And can be used or misused in
or
any way that, exactly, that any way that anyone deems appropriate. So maybe there's a trust component, right? I do not trust other people, coupled with my stage and knowing what's on the line for that, right? Like you talked about with being a professor. I've seen people...
Or even just being published.
Fired for... far less. Just because, you know, someone said something or put something or whatever, right?
Absolutely. You're in a very different...
and so it doesn't matter...
I don't want to say social status, but you're in a different realm than I am.
There's more at risk there. Yes. I remember during one of these murder documentaries that I watched, it said, you can say with 100% certainty that you'll never commit a crime, but you can never say with 100% certainty that you'll never be accused of committing a crime. And that always has resonated with me, right? So I can say for 100% certainty that I never mean to offend someone or say something that is hurtful or right, but I'm just so aware. I have this hypervigilance of awareness associated with the fact that anything I say in a moment in time is only ever precedented by my own experiences. And that just due to that, I could be offending someone. And then I don't trust that that person's going to come and say something about it. And now we live in a world where someone's going to take that and throw it across the internet and then be like, look at this. You know, horrible person who does whatever. And then before you know it, you've lost control of the narrative. So there's the themes, right? There's control, there's trust, there's inability to make sure that everyone sees you. It's so important for me that I've crafted or created this false sense of control around how I am seen in the eyes of other people, right? And when there is a potential attack to that, which I would say, to be fair, the worst that's ever happened from potential attack is that one viral video that got like 750,000 views in people's comments. But how did I keep myself away from that? I just didn't read the comments, right? And so that, I think, all of those fears and all of those discomforts, coupled with the fact that I do want to state clearly how I feel about certain things, but maybe it is my mental health training. I feel like I can't state how I feel about certain things with also pre-qualifying that with, this is just what I know at this point in time. This is just how I feel right now. I probably could be very easily swayed into a different direction, specifically if you're going to hit me with something that's empathy-based about someone who's experienced something or felt something differently, or in this case scenario, what about this?
So I think that's the part that's interesting, is that when you are so empathetic, it's really difficult to make decisions sometimes.
Oh, very much so.
And, you know, it's funny. The one thing I just happened to post the other day on my personal page about classroom rules. And it was interesting to me to see the comments and who they were coming from. And I thought that's a really interesting, because I know everybody's backstory on the comments that came through. And I thought, of course you're going to feel that way because that impacts you and your family.
Yeah, right.
And this is why I feel this way, because it impacts me and my family.
Right.
Do I have any ill will towards all of that? And that's what becomes tricky, because at the end of the day, I do have empathy. But at the same time, I'm like, if we're constantly leading from that lens, then nothing is solved, because God forbid, it's like this whole transgendered in sports and this whole thing with the Olympics, right? It's like people are like, well, let's just have separate but equal. And then it's like, but that's offensive to this and that's offensive to that. It's like, oh my God, well then somebody's always going to be offended at some point. Right? So what's
the opposite of that? Right. So having an opinion on something and saying, let's use the example of the classroom thing, right? You're like, okay, so this comes from my family background. But
circumstance.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And what makes sense for your family, what makes sense for your kids, right? I think what happens in those scenarios. So Rebecca had posted and it was on your personal page? It wasn't on
my personal page. Yes.
The Facebook page?
Correct.
Okay. So Rebecca had posted a video and it was on classroom management rules. And it was a teacher who basically said, if you're going to be in my classroom, here's the things that you're going to abide by.
She called them non-negotiables.
Non-negotiables. There was like 5 things or something that were non-negotiables. And so you're saying that if you're posting that and you're like, this is my opinion and my thought about what this fits, what would be your expectation or thoughts about people from different family backgrounds who responded in a certain way? Who are like, ooh, that doesn't really sit right with me because, or ooh, that feels really strict in an environment where my kid's not going to be able to participate in that. Or I wonder if we could just change up some of the wording, for instance, from non-negotiable to, I don't know, what would be less than non-negotiable, but like classroom culture, like just those small changes in terms.
But why does that matter? Because in my opinion, non-negotiable is clear. Right. This is a non-negotiable. You break this rule, this is what happens.
Right.
Culture is very gray. That's very gray.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but then...
Because non-negotiable is exclusionary.
But I'm okay with that.
Okay. So I'm okay with that. That's important.
Yeah.
But then what you also said was, what you're really saying is, I'm okay if other people get excluded from these types of environments or situations. But that's my kid that's getting excluded. For real. That's my kid who's getting excluded. So then what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for our relationship? So how do I feel safe in a relationship where you have very clear-cut opinions on the fact that my kid should not be in a classroom with your child because my kid can't do what your kid could do. And you want my kid in a separate room somewhere where he can be with kids who do what kids like him do. What does that mean?
Why can't my kid be in a separate room?
But what does that mean? Right? So I think that's the part where that's exclusionary is how does someone respond to that and not what are you expecting from that? You want people to not have a reaction, or do you want people to like what?
No. It wasn't that at all. The reason why I put that out there is because my feeling is, in a public classroom environment, there has to be specific standards. It can't be, well, we're going to take everything case by case, because I just don't think that's how the world works. And kids spend more time in school than they do at home, unless it's summer. Well, even then, maybe they're not at home so much. So they're learning a lot, and they're learning about work culture, public culture, things like that. So I guess I just don't trust that the translation out of quote unquote public school when you finish high school is going to necessarily equate to case by case basis when you get into the work world.
And you're worried that if a kid like my kid is in your daughter's classroom, that she's not going to be adequately prepared for that world outside because he's slowed them down?
No. Maybe we need to say what the non-negotiables were, just so that people have a clear understanding. So the non-negotiables were, you pick up after yourself.
Right. If you throw something in the trash, says pick it up.
Pick it up. We are not
I'm not picking up after you.
Right.
You make a mess, you clean it up.
You clean it up.
Right.
That was the one.
Yeah.
That was one of them. The second one was classroom resources like pens, scissors, crayons, things like that are used as your working tools. They are not used as toys. And the minute you use them as toys, I'm taking them away, and you will have to figure out how to complete your work without them.
Right.
I feel that that's perfectly acceptable. The second one was you need to keep your hands to yourself, and you don't get to hit back. And if you do, you are immediately sent to the administrative office.
Right.
We do not, I don't care if your parents tell you to fight back. I don't care. You are going to be removed and sent to the principals. You keep your hands to yourself. That was the third.
One was, when I talk to you, you need to look at me, and you need to acknowledge what I've said to you, and you need to say back.
Nope, she didn't say that.
Something else.
Nope,
something you need to have some type of dialogue with me.
Nope, she didn't say that. She said, when I acknowledge you, I need you to acknowledge me back. She did not specify how it was to be done. She just said, when I'm standing at my door greeting you, you need to acknowledge me, is how she said it.
That was 4. I don't remember what the fifth one was.
There might have been another one. But they were, in my mind, those are standard civility practices that should happen at all times. If you were walking into a store and checking out with the checkout person, do you have to have a full-on conversation with them? Absolutely not. Do you look at them and smile, or you don't need to say anything? You don't need to do nothing. You acknowledge their presence. That is standard in my book. You need to clean up after yourself. That is standard in my book.
At their highest level, I agree with that.
Yeah.
At their highest level.
Okay.
It's when we get to the nuances of what that means. My kid's going to put my hand on some kid in that classroom. I'm 100% positive. Why? Because he has ADD, he has an auditory processing disorder, and he has a very hard time paying attention. Mm-hmm. Part of his ADD and his auditory processing disorder is that he's going to put his hand on someone when he has gotten stimulated to a point where he can't sit there and pay attention. Honestly, because the classroom environment is not made for a kid like my kid. Mm-hmm. And so now when my kid's in that classroom environment, what happens to him? Now he's just going to get sent to the office constantly, and he's going to be, identified as the bad kid and whatever. Now, I'm not saying that my kid gets to take cheap shots at all these kids all of the time, right? But I am saying that a good teacher who isn't talking about non-negotiables from the standpoint of don't put your hands on me, says something along the lines of, we need to be mindful about where we are at versus where other people are at. And when we do put our hands on other people, there will be consequences to that. Right? Mm-hmm. What that consequence looks like doesn't mean my kid's automatically getting sent to the office. Maybe it means we've identified that he is that kind of kid, and we remove him from a situation, or we get him to his stand-up desk, or we get him his fidget toys before he puts his hands on someone else.
But what's interesting to me about this whole conversation, again, you're coming at it from your lens. I'm coming at it from my lens. My lens is, this is just basic civility. Some bully kid who maybe doesn't have any of those issues that your child is diagnosed with. This is just an asshole who beats up on people.
But I would also say,
you don't get to do that.
But that asshole kid also is having behaviors that are indicative of something else going on for him. And I think that's what happens, is that when
But that's not the teacher's job to figure out, in my opinion.
What?
If this is a constant problem, the teacher has to manage so many things. I'm making a lot of assumptions that this teacher is just in a basic ass classroom with probably not a lot of support.
As they all are.
Right. So therefore, she can't take the time out of the day managing. So send them somewhere where where that person can be like, let's really get down to why your hands are on other people.
If that's the case, that's fine. But don't give me your 5 non-negotiables, because your 5 non-negotiables have indicated to me that only certain types of people are going to be accepted here, because I don't have time to manage the rest of it.
See, I don't take that video at all.
She said it was like how she said it, because I agree in concept with the general principles about what she is talking about.
But she's not, in my opinion, she's not talking to our aged people. That's her language to the 3rd graders.
I got a bigger problem with that.
I mean, and that's okay. That's okay. You can do that.
But the problem that I have is that unless you are part of a group that has felt that level of exclusion, you're not aware of the ways in which those terms and those wordings, when they are excluding your child, how that feels. And so you continue to get oppressed over and over and over again when people don't pay attention to their language, because it fits their narrative and their family and they're okay with it. The smallest change in language in my mind allows us to both be in a place where both can feel included. That doesn't have to go all the way to the crazy left liberal place of being like, okay, well, if you do touch someone and punch them in the face, well, we're going to sit down, we're all going to sing Kumbaya and handle it together. I don't feel that way either, right? But it's the small little nuances in language that make a difference to, in this case, parents. I think this could be widespread on any single topic, right? If we're not paying attention to the language, I happen to be incredibly linguistic as well, so that matters to me. Words matter to me. The small little changes that we can make in that help people feel like they can still be included while standards can still be kept. And my problem with her non-negotiables here is I don't know much in life that has a non-negotiable label on it because we are not all the same. We do not all experience things in the same way. There has to be some degree of variability.
Yes, and I'm interpreting what she's saying as it's not directed to children who need support in other ways. Do you know what I mean? Like what you talked about with Carter putting his hands on people. My guess is it's not directed towards him. It's directed towards somebody specific. It's the kids playing with the scissors, throwing crayons, putting glue all over on purpose. Not the kids who are struggling because of X, Y, and Z, whatever. It's the purposeful stuff. It's the I'm going to make a mess with the glitter and whatever all over and then get up and walk away. Or I'm in the cafeteria and I'm just going to eat my lunch and leave it all there. It's that kind of behavior that I believe she is talking about.
I think that's because I know you and you have the ability to state something like that, but also know that there are exclusions.
Absolutely.
But how would anyone know that? One, if they didn't know you. And two, even someone who does know you incredibly well sees that you post that and immediately is like, well, my kid's out of that class. That's me. I've known you for 20 years, right? And that's part of the problem of where we're at right now is you can't have a whole 3-paragraph diatribe where you're like, hey, I saw this Instagram video and I just want to make a couple things clear. I don't think this includes this and I don't think it includes that, right? But
I wouldn't say that because I didn't.
Right. And in reality,
that
I'm not even make sense.
I'm not going to
like it's too much.
And I'm also not going to debate with anybody either because that's not my personality, and B, it's not something that I feel so strongly about that I have to go back and forth with someone. But it's just my general opinion that this is civility. And maybe I should have said that. Maybe I should have said, this is just my standard opinion of civility in a classroom.
But you do have the ability to be able to make those next step, you know, oh, well, I wasn't really saying that, right?
But I also believe that when it gets to a certain point, there does have to be some clear-cut
distinctions.
Yes.
Or accommodations or whatever.
Or whatever it may be, because no one's thriving. No, and everybody deserves to thrive. I do feel that way. I feel very strongly about that. And reality is, if I could homeschool and do those kinds of things and do things the way that I want to do them, I absolutely would. But that's not my luxury. You know?
I wonder if part of the challenge, though, is everyone is always viewing things through their own lens. And what's happening now because of that, and I think that you can't change that, is that people feel hurt, not even offended. They feel hurt. They don't know how to acknowledge it as hurt. And then when they're feeling hurt, then they don't know how to reconcile that hurt. And it's people who get hurt more often than others who continue, specifically in what we're seeing right now politically, get hurt more and more and more and more. So every time you post the little meme that says Trump 2024, right? Someone's getting hurt by that. Now, you might not be someone who hates LGBTQ people.
Right.
But that person who's LGBTQ says you do if you are posting that meme, right? So people are getting hurt. And it happens to be the people who are more marginalized already, or the people who have already been experiencing hurt and have fought for their rights, that are so tired of having to fight that same fight, that when something as simple as something like that gets posted and they don't know or think to themselves, well, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt, she's meeting this more generally, that through their lens, they're again hurt.
Right, because
and
it's their lens.
Just constantly hurt.
That's right. That's right.
And my hope, and part of why I think I hedge my bets in many of these scenarios, is I don't want people to feel that hurt. And I know that if I have a strong opinion about something, that I can talk to you about that. I can, have my beers around the fire with people talking about that. But I find myself as an extreme empath, highly hypervigilant to the fact that I do know people come from their own lens and they are going to be potentially hurt. And I don't want someone to feel hurt through either misunderstanding my message or through knowing that their lens. And so that is what, to circle back around to the very beginning of this conversation, is going to keep me more vanilla in certain situations.
Sure.
And what is going to not have me, I honestly wouldn't tell you that I have incredibly strong opinions about much. There are some things, right? And I do think that might also be a trauma response. That's a whole different episode, right? So empathy as a form of trying to be a little bit more vanilla for me comes from the fact that I'm constantly thinking through, people may have a reaction to this. This might upset some other people. This might trigger someone else. I don't want someone to feel this certain way. And what I lose as a result of that is the authenticity of having a critically defined opinion on a whole bunch of things, or not posting something that happens to mean something of importance to me, right? So that is something that I lose as a result of that approach. The opposite, though, seems true for you, that you can be more opinionated on certain things. But what you will lose as a result of that approach is people feeling comfortable coming to talk to you about certain things, or people feeling close to you because they feel that they've been harmed in some way, right? And so I think that's one of the differences for both of us, is that we've both calculated that, and you're just willing to take risks that I'm not, and I'm willing to be more passive than you are. There's not necessarily a right or wrong, but there's positives and negatives that come with both of those approaches.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, I just think about, like I said, when it comes to my kids, just like when it comes to your kids and anybody else's kids, I want the best for my kids just as much as you want the best for your kids. And your path of that is a certain way, and my path is a certain way. It doesn't make either one better or worse. And there are ebbs and flows amongst it at all times. And I think that's what's so hard, is specifically when it comes to election years, when all that crap is just thrown out there. It really forces you into a box in a lot of ways, because I think about, my child, the Olympics being on. My daughter's an athlete. I'll be damned the day some man is on her team. And so I feel very strongly about that. Do I have people that I know that are transgendered and love them very much? Absolutely. But that doesn't change my opinion about female sports, So I have to be, that's what becomes tricky for me, because I am not black and white. But I am black and white with certain things, like, when my daughter goes to college, she's not going to be sharing a dorm room with a random person of the opposite sex. Like, now they have co-ed dorm rooms that you could be, a girl and a boy could be put into the same room because it's just gender neutral. I'm not talking about trans people. I'm talking about human beings.
Yeah, anybody. Yeah.
I have a problem with that. I am not okay with that, period. So, but that comes to my kid. I don't know. I think that it's very difficult to be, I'm afraid is not the word, but I don't want to say something and then people see my actions when it comes to my child be different. Does that make sense? Because then it doesn't seem, it's like, well, then what are you, lying? Are you just telling me what you want me to hear?
So it's important for you to be aligned in what you say and what you do.
Yes, that feels important to me. And people can judge that how they want. If they think I'm hard and fast, or if they think I don't see other things. But at the end of the day, sometimes there just has to be a decision made. You know, am I okay with putting my kids on a sports team that is known to be a particular kind of way? You know what I mean? Based on whatever it may be. I either am or I'm not. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly. Am I okay? Am I going to seek out a dance school that is a specific kind of way? Whether it be competitive, whether it be all-inclusive, whatever. Yes, I'm going to do what I feel is best suited for my kid, right? Or I will take them out and put them somewhere else. I don't have that luxury with public school.
Mm-hmm. Why is it so important to have, for you specifically, to have congruity? Congruity?
I think that's all right.
Congruentness? Whatever. Between how you say you feel about something and the actions that you do. Like, that feels like this is really important to me, and I want this to be the case, in a similar way that I don't want to make a really strong determination about someone because I don't want to offend someone, because I don't genuinely want to hurt people's feelings, feels like a lifeblood to me. So why is that part so important to you? Where does that come from, or why?
Why is it important to be congruent? So I heard two different things, but maybe I'm misinterpreting. So
why is it important to be so? Why is that so uber important to you to be congruent in what you say and then what you do? Because you've said a couple of times, I don't want to say something and then, you know, all of a sudden I go over here and I do something different. And then people are like, you know, what the hell? You know, where is she? Why is that congruency really important to you?
Because I think that's, at the end of the day, just my core, the coreness of myself. And that's where I can go to sleep at night, because it doesn't feel like people pleasing, I guess, is the word. I don't know, because I would never want somebody to be like, oh, well, she told me this, but then did you see what she did?
Why? Because that would what?
That is more hurtful, I think.
You mean hurtful to you?
No, to other people.
Oh.
Because it's like, well, wait a minute. She told me.
You've duped them?
Maybe. Yes. Yeah.
You've led them to believe something.
Right.
And then
all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute. She said she believes and supports in this, but then she made this action over here, and that doesn't align. So that feels weird.
Is that more about other people, or is that more about, I don't want people coming back to me and being like, you hypocrite.
Maybe.
You said you weren't okay with this, but what? Is that also coming from a place of not wanting to be misunderstood?
Maybe. I mean, I'm also not, again,
I'm not saying why, like it's a bad quality. No. I'm just genuinely
trying to
interested in,
yeah, absolutely.
In why.
I don't know. But at the same time, I feel like
if you were misunderstood, or if you did say something and then did something else, what would happen?
You mean if the person called me out on it?
Yeah. Or what would your fear be if that were to happen? That means what about you?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess I would need an example, because
if you said, I am not okay with Taylor going off to college and living in a co-ed living environment. That is not okay. That's one of my biggest platforms. I am not okay with that.
That's
I want all gendered, all same. I want her to be in a full-on female dorm.
Yeah.
It's all women.
Now, granted, what's difficult too is when you turn 18, you're considered an adult, right? So I really don't have a lot of control. I can have influence over her, but at the end of the day, she's going to pick to do what she wants, right? So that's kind of a hard one. But
if you said you're really not okay with that at the end of the day, And then, well, I mean, that is a bad example
I know.
because people have independent choice.
She can choose, and
Right.
and her and
So-
I can have it out, but I can't
you
have it out with
wouldn't-
the school.
You wouldn't
You know.
consider that an aspect of you being a hypocrite. Because if Taylor just goes and decides to do something else, you're still real clear on how you feel about that. So I'm trying to think of an example
so-
where you
I
would
know.
say something
I
would be
know.
really true and then you would go back on that or do something else. Well,
I'm trying to think of a situation that I can control. Like the only things I can think of that are a potential issue and gender neutral bathrooms in elementary schools.
okay.
Right? Like boys and girls using not just a single stall.
Yeah.
Like a full on. I have a really strong opinion about that.
Yep.
What do I do with that? I can't.
So then
I could pull her
then
out.
let's say you join the PTA,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then you are like
Which
the
I wouldn't
mom.
do.
You are the mom on
I
the
wouldn't do it.
PTA, right? And you're on the PTA, and now the PTA has taken up the fact that we're going to bring gender neutral bathrooms to the K-12, and you are highly against it, and you're very clear that you're highly against it. But there's 5 people on this board, 3 of them vote. Absolutely, this is what we're doing. You and one other mom.
Or whoever,
Vote
dad,
no,
whatever.
right?
Community member. I don't know how it
Vote
works.
no.
Yeah.
And then it comes out in the PTA newsletter. PTA, approves gender neutral restrooms. This is what we're doing. Would that be an example of something that was really hard for you? Or would you still be like, I'm okay with that because I was a no vote? I wouldn't have changed my vote to yes.
Correct. I wouldn't have changed my vote to yes.
So even if you were the holdout one vote, that still would be okay because
Yes.
you're essentially,
I stated my opinion.
and it would be okay for you to still stay on the PTA because you've still stated your opinion.
Yes. I state my opinion. If the group decides to move in a different direction, that's fine. The ultimate problem I have is I'm not okay with that. What do I do now? What are my other alternatives for my child's education? I don't have money to send her to a private school. So now do I just have to suck it up and deal because that's my only option? Or do I figure it out? Do you know what I mean? Like that's where I struggle. It's like when the public is catering to the public, where are the lines drawn?
Yeah. Interesting.
That's what I meant by the non-negotiables. There has to be some standard of civility in all cases.
Sure. And I actually really agree with that. I just don't think they're called non-negotiables because when they're non-negotiable, then we have a dictator in that classroom who's determining what type of people belong in this classroom. And that if you can't fit in that mold, then you're not allowed here. But if I don't call it a non-negotiable and I call it, I don't know, something other than non-negotiable, right? That isn't as flowery as my hopes for the class, which also feels too limited to me, right? But something that feels like we can strike a happy medium with the fact that I have some real clear guidelines and expectations around how we're going to be. I actually think Kelly up the street did a really nice job in her response. She was like, here, I fixed these, right? And when I read it, I thought, I really like how a lot of that is worded. Some of it might be even more little flowery than what I even would have said myself, right? But something about that change in the language in some ways made it feel like a safe place to still have expectations of how we're going to run this classroom, but also didn't include my kiddo in the process. And it's something as small as one word, right? And that's where I get back to this hurt dynamic. I'm just so aware how hurt people are right now, particularly people who don't fit into certain molds. And we keep hurting those people over and over and over again when we use restrictive language that doesn't include or in some way acknowledge that there may be some type of difference in some way, shape, or form. And continuing that narrative is scary for me, right? Because I know I'm strong enough to talk through it, to work through it, to have an opinion about it, to, start using different language to combat it in a different way. But I just know so many other people, particularly people who have been so marginalized, aren't. And when you don't have a place for that hurt and you keep feeling oppressed by people who might have the best intentions in the world and not even mean it, but it still hurts through their lens, then I worry about what that means for the future of everybody.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we're just going to continue to get more and more divided. Mm-hmm. That's what is going to happen, because I still feel the way I do, and I'm sorry that it causes hurt, and that's not my intent, but I still feel that way, right? I mean, we can change the language all day. That's fine, but I still feel that way. And if that standard can't be met, then it's time to talk about alternatives, or maybe that's not the right environment because it just isn't. Mm-hmm. So maybe that means my kid needs to go into a different classroom. Okay. Like it's about what's best for everyone, and my only experience in the classroom with my youngest is that she really struggled in 3rd grade because she was nice to the kid who couldn't focus. And she was forced to sit next to him because she was the only one who would include him in things, which ultimately hurt her in her academics and her ability to focus because he was so distracting. But because she's in 3rd grade and has terrible communication skills, couldn't tell anybody because she didn't want to hurt this kid's feelings. Mm-hmm. So she took it all on, right? I have a problem with that. The teacher openly admitted, I used her because I couldn't, he's too much. That's a problem.
It is a problem.
So you see what I mean? Like, it's because the teacher can't manage all things happening at all times. So that's where it becomes tricky for me, because it's like, I'm not a teacher. Kelly up the street is a teacher. She sees the ins and outs. She sees the dynamics in the school. She's a part of the big meetings. She's a part of the planning. She's a part of all the things, right? So she comes at it from a very different perspective. Mm-hmm. Coming from a parent I'm just a parent who, of course, wants the best for my kid, just like everybody else is. But that doesn't mean I want to exclude other kids. It just means somehow we need to find a way that, and it might be offensive to people, but sometimes it has to, maybe we need to not be offended and just be like, this is the way that the kids are going to be grouped for success. Why can't we? That's a flowery way of saying it. But why does it have to be, well, your kid has all these struggles, so we're going to stick them in this type of classroom? Why can't it be, well, this is where your kid thrives? How is it any different? They're still learning the same thing. They're still getting the same social experiences. They're still having the specials and everything. It's not like they are.
What's the cutoff for that, though?
That's the question.
So like the
that's
problem
the question.
is,
if we get to a point where it's like, okay, you can't maintain these standards, that's my point.
But
where is the cutoff? Civility.
Is it civility standards? Is it how he does on his MAPS test? Is it, so like we're not clear on what those standards are. But my kid's got phenomenal emotional communication skills.
Right.
Better than every single other kid that I have seen in that age group, right? Does that make the cutoff, or do we not care about that because his math score isn't where it's supposed to be?
But that's I don't know. See, and that's a whole different, when you're talking emotional intelligence and like just behavioral issues versus academics, those are two very different things.
But they're all combined in the same kid who's in that classroom, who hears that teacher say, we got some non-negotiables here.
Yeah.
So my kid might be the brightest math kid you've ever met in your life, but he's not keeping his hands to himself. Is he welcome there or not? Mm-hmm. Or my kid keeps his hands to himself, but his reading level is behind, right? Is he welcome there or not? Who are we allowing in these classroom environments? Who's setting that standard? Who's saying that it's okay? And then what's the cutoff for that, right? And I think those extremes of these kids over here versus these kids over here, they're the easy ones to figure out at the end of the day.
So then here's my question to you. So if, let's say our kids get along great, but let's say that your kid is next to my kid and constantly distracting my kid. Is it offensive if I go into the teacher and say, I don't want her kid near mine because he can't keep his hands to himself?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Great.
Totally fine with that. And what I would have hoped would happen was that I had some awareness of the fact that my kid is the one who's distracting in class, and then I'm working behind the scenes with the IEP, the 504, whatever.
Yes.
Because I do have a great awareness that just because my kid might be struggling in some of these areas doesn't mean that then needs to be impacting other kids at such a great level, right? But I'm going to be working on saying, what are we putting in place? How are we helping this student be successful? I can tell you just a normal classroom environment ain't it for my kid. I've seen it, Kelly up the streets tutoring Carter this summer. He's thriving. Why? Because it's one-on-one.
Yes, and it's probably interesting.
She sets a timer.
Engaged.
She says, we're going to work for 15 minutes, then you get 5 minutes off. He watches that timer like it is, whatever, ready to go, right?
Now,
will we be able to replicate that? Never.
I want to be clear. I'm not painting a picture that my kid is this perfect angel, stellar child who doesn't get into trouble, do all the things.
Right.
Please do not hear that. She is as feisty as they come.
Right.
Can she follow simple standard instructions?
Is she going to pass for social norms? Absolutely.
Correct.
And so
but
that
don't let me
is a benefit.
I'm trying,
right?
I don't want people to think, here she is. All I'm saying is that, again, it's just civility is so important to me because I just see grown adults who can't function either by choice. And that's where I often think it is. It's just rudeness, entitlement. That's the core, in my opinion, that needs support and help. People who just physically, that's just that's different. It's different. So anyway.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting topic. I'd love to hear other people weigh in on it. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about this entire conversation and their opinions and their thoughts on it. And toward the end of this conversation, I think it's interesting that, like usual, we get to the same core, the same base. We're really not always that far off, but our approaches to how we approach that topic and then how we get there without an 80-minute conversation, right, about what that looks like, which ain't nobody having, right? People are not having these conversations on social media. They're not having their conversations with their neighbor. They're not sitting down and having these conversations. You're not getting even closer to that central point. You and I are not equally aligned and making it to the middle, but we are a whole lot closer to that middle point than it would appear just by a response on Facebook, just by just general, perceptions of who people are, right? And I think that's the greater issue at play here is...
Right.
No one has the time or energy right now to sit down and have these types of conversations and to see that last question you asked. So would it be okay if your kid was just annoying the shit out of my kid? No, it wouldn't. And if I said, yeah, I think my kid should be able to impact your kid as much as possible, and I don't really care what happens to your kid, then we're a lot further off than we think we are, right?
Just
and
like
that's
my
also
kid,
an important conversation.
Just like my kid can't be the nasty talking behind your back, distracting you by, being sneaky, like any of that none of that is acceptable.
Right. But at the end of the day, your question was, is that okay? And my response is absolutely not. And I'm going to try and figure out how I can manage that behind the scenes.
Just like if my daughter had come to me and said, Mom, again, she was in third grade and she doesn't want to offend anybody or whatever. If she was able to come to me and say, hey, I have to sit next to X whoever because he doesn't have any friends and I'm nice to him, but he's constantly touching me or he's distracting me when I'm trying to do my reading. And now I can't go to recess because I didn't get my reading done. If she had just come to me to talk about that, I would have then said to her, let me give you some strategies on how to work together.
Or you
I'm
would
not
have
saying
talked to the
kick him out.
You would have talked to the teacher.
Yes, and said, let's talk about this.
I think what people might be a little surprised to hear is that your conversation with the teacher sounds like this. Hey, I'm really aware that everyone has different learning styles and that some kids, over here may need different things. And I want to make sure that kid gets what that kid needs and that Sawyer's also getting what she needs. And I'm feeling like she might be a bit of a sacrificial lamb right now as someone who's going to be more going with the flow.
I might not even have said that. I might have been more generic. and come to the teacher and say, hey, I just had an interesting conversation with Sawyer. Can you let me tell you what she said to me. Can you tell me a little more about the classroom dynamic? And then she would have said what she said. Oh, he struggles. He doesn't get along. She's so good to him. And then I would say, you know what? That's great. However, this is the consequence of that. What can we do together to make this work?
That's what I want people to comment on. I want people to comment on, do you believe that is how you would have expected Rebecca to handle that situation based on how this started?
Probably not.
Which then brings me full circle to the beginning of the conversation was it's important for you to be transparent in what you say and what you do. But what you say is, I got these non-negotiables and then this kid belongs over here and this kid belongs over there. That's how it comes out. But I know that's not who you are in practice. And so the question then becomes, which one's the truth? Right? Well, is it that when you're going to have these conversations with the teacher that you're backing down because you want to be like, I don't really know. I want to make sure.
I don't think I'm backing down. I think I'm getting information.
Genuinely how you are, and if that is genuinely how you are, how come that's not coming across in the very beginning when we're having this conversation about how you feel about things? It's like you hedge your bets a little bit more when it comes to the actual conversation with the teacher, which I'm all aligned with. I think that's beautiful, and that's who I know you to be. But I'm curious.
I don't think it's hedging bets.
I would love the listeners to weigh in on, would you have thought that would have been her approach? If you didn't know Rebecca, based on how the session started, that's what feels incongruent to me.
See, and I disagree because I don't think it's hedging bets. I still stand by the non-negotiables. I still stand by all of those things. But
your approach, you feel like how you've identified you think that based on what you said initially, that's what people would think your approach would be with that teacher, that they wouldn't think that you would come in and say, my child is getting impacted every single day in class by this other child who seems to have a problem. And I'm fine that child has a problem, but my kid's not going to be impacted by it.
But I don't think that her video is indicative of my approach. It's indicative of my standards. I still feel that way about the standards. Would I have reasonable conversations and try to see all points of view? Yes. But at the end of the day, I still stand by those standards. So somehow we need to get to a point where we can all either work with those standards or something different has to happen. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so the reasonable approach that I see you taking in the classroom in that scenario with Sawyer, if that also came out initially in some of the words that you used to describe the situation at hand and how you felt about it, I would feel that would be more congruent. This could also be one of those things I go back and I rewatch and I'm like, nope, she's been saying that all along. But the feeling I have in the moment,
but this is the lens.
You come in hot with these real strong feelings and opinions, and I don't want these things to happen, and get your gender neutral bathrooms out of here. I do not like that, and I do not like these gendered housings, and I do not like that this kid in the class. So you have these really strong words, opinions, and feelings, and yet you walked into that classroom and you said, could you help me understand this situation a little bit and how this is? So if your approach in the beginning with your words mirrored what your genuine approach is, and I know you to be the person who walks in, then I think it would be easier for me to hear. But me being who I am through my lens and through my black and white, I only hear your stark words, and then your stark words paint a picture of who you are that to me is not congruent with who this person is. And I think that stems from this fearful place of, if you don't come out loud and proud about how you feel about these things, you worry you're going to be incongruent. And I feel like if you come across as, hey, you know, I still have these standards, but I'd like to use some words that are along the lines of, I'd like to figure out how we can both win in this situation, or how we can, right? Then that would feel more congruent to me. I think that's just what I'm reacting to, is the starkness of language. Again, I'm linguistic and will take people at face value versus the approach.
And I see them one and the same. I see them one and the same. This is my standard. This is how I feel about it at the end of the day. And how we get there may be different, but at the end of the day, this is what I stand for.
And that's what I would love to hear other people from, again, their lenses is this me having my own sensitive lens on it and like just putting too much weight on the words and the tone that you use versus your approach? Or is it that people are like, oh, I actually am really surprised that she would respond from that standpoint? I'm curious what that is, especially if you're saying that congruency is important to you, right? I think the opposite would be true for me. If I was like, hey, we should all get along and this and that and the other thing, and then I'm like, get your kid out of here, he's a pain in the ass. They'd be like, okay, yeah, that's a little weird. She seemed like she really kind of like loved everyone, was on everyone's page, but she has a real strong opinion about such and such, right? So there's that congruency, but just in a very different way.
I think that's an extreme example because I don't believe that I have very strong opinions about certain things, but I don't think that they're brash in that way. I don't think using the word non-negotiable means get your pain in the ass kid out. I don't think that's what that means. I think again, it's just
I was using it as a separate example.
I know. I totally get that, but I think that's where that's where sometimes in our society we become too divided and too muddy because it just you can't be all things. How does that work?
You can't be all things. But yeah, in your approach in that classroom, you were all things.
No, I was coming in to get as much information as possible. And then when you have the information, you have to make a decision.
Sure. I do exactly the same thing.
But at the end of the day,
you're still approaching it from all things. You didn't come in on your broomstick pissed off.
No. And I would never do that anyway. But I don't think that that's what I was portraying either.
Right.
I just think.
Yeah. And that's what I'm asking listeners to tell us. I'm curious.
Yeah.
If your perception is closer to what people think, or if my sensitivity to the fact that I don't think those things are congruent. I know how you feel about it. I know you think you're saying the same thing that you're acting out, and I'm seeing them as separate. I'm seeing them as you're coming in real hot with how you feel and your opinions about certain things. But then when you're actually approaching it, it's much more mild and caring and supportive and inquisitive and curious and loving and all of those things.
But at the end of the day, it will filter down to that opinion and to that standard.
And the reality is, so will mine.
Absolutely.
Right? So will mine.
And again, they're really, at the end of the day, I think if our society looked at those differences, there really wouldn't be a lot of differences. I think that there's a way to figure it all out in some capacity, but because you've used the word marginalized and people who've been hurt in the past, it will never work because what's the alternative? I keep going back because the Olympics is so hot and sports is so hot. There's a hot topic coming into school this year. Like all of that. I keep referring to those kinds of things. And at what point do you just shut it all down and say, fine, then nobody can play sports? Because somebody might be hurt. One person, 6 people, 12 people. You know, like what do you do?
Isn't that the fear? Right. Isn't that the fear? The fear at the end of the day is that if we don't come in with an incredibly strong opinion of exactly how we feel and make sure that we are known for what we believe in, that the only other alternative is that now nobody gets anything and now we're in the complete opposite end, right? And I don't live in that space. So
I don't think it's fear. I
believe that it's fine to have these types of conversations and to not have to have an incredibly strong opinion about where we come from on these things, and to know that through the process of curiosity and working it out, that maybe we can come to a solution that's going to work for the most number of kids. But I don't believe that's how most people approach these conversations. Instead, everyone's coming from a place of incredible certainty, incredible stoicness of how they feel about certain things, not being able to check their past baggage of why they feel that particular way, in a clear, like, my way or the highway, this is where we're at. And because we're not able to live with the ambiguity of can we sit with it for a little while and figure it out, then it's automatically assumed that my way of processing or working through some of these things are going to mean that we will never come to a resolution. No one will ever decide anything. Everyone, it's just these extremes all of the time. And we're not able to spend time in that middle ground of being like, yeah, this is complicated. This is hard. This is interesting, right? There's been a couple times, even on this podcast, that there's been statements toward me that are like, what do you want to do? Just sit around and talk about it all the time? No, I don't. But I don't think any of us are sitting around and talking about it for long enough. We're just all sticking our stake in the sand, saying, this is how I feel about it. And if you can't get on this camp, I'm sorry for you. Well, you just think differently, I guess. I guess we'll agree to disagree. It's really hard to be in that middle ground of people that's like, well, maybe I don't want to agree to disagree. Maybe I don't even want one of us to agree or to agree, but maybe I do want to sit with it for a minute and have a conversation and figure out where our common ground is and where it's coming from. Does that take longer? Shit, yeah. Is it harder? Abso-fucking-lutely. It's really fucking hard and it's exhausting, right? It's a whole lot easier to stick that flag in the cement or the sand and to say, man, this is how I feel about it at the end of the day. But I don't think that's how most people are in the real world. It's just who they present themselves are with certain topics because it's easier and because sometimes it feels like life or death, right? Sometimes it feels like I got to be so freaking clear on how I feel about this. It's like those memes that go around that's like, screw me over once, shame on me. Screw me over twice, shame on you. I ain't coming back a third time. Listen, we don't need to be so definitive about not coming back a third time because life really isn't that easy. Most people are coming back a third time. And you know what? Maybe we can lean into that and say, I guess I don't always know what's in someone's marriage. I guess I don't always know how I would react in a situation I've never experienced before, right? People don't want to sit in that space. It's incredibly uncomfortable. So instead, we put out our memes that say, you do this to me, here's what my reaction is. Well, I'd love to do a research study on that because 9 times out of 10, I'm going to put you in a scenario where you said that one thing that you would never possibly do, you're going to do, and you still ain't going to do it because that's not life. So let's stop lying to ourselves about the fact that we all have these real clear opinions on everything that's going to happen when this happens to me in this life, and this is what's going to happen, that's exactly where we're going to go. I just want us to be a little more comfortable with the ambiguity if I don't really have an answer for this yet, and I'm willing to figure it out and play around with it. But just because I don't have that definitive answer does not mean that I'm, just want to sit around for years and years and years and keep trying to figure it out, you know?
Yeah, it just gets tough with, I think a lot of it is American society too, frankly.
Right.
And,
Oh my God, this is hilarious. This affirmation card I just pulled to end our session.
Is it a canoe?
Nope, it's a hand holding a sun. If this could not be the perfect affirmation card to end this session. I know that I am the only one who determines what is and is not right for me.
That's right.
I am the final say.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I loved that.
Me too. Isn't empathy amazing?
Well, we're amazing. I don't know about all this empathy stuff.
That's fine. I accept you wherever you are.
Oh, God.
I love you.
I love you too.
And if you love us, please like and subscribe to More Love, the Power of Empathy podcast, wherever you get your podcasts.
See you next time.